Do I need to watch my language?
No, you can say whatever the
explicit rating.
Like it's gratuitous at this point if I said fuck, but you can say whatever you want.
All right.
So, because I feel like we're going to be saying a lot of this is fucking stupid. I don't know.
Well, and you might definitely feel that way during some parts of it, depending on what we get into. I wasn't sure how family friendly this was supposed to be. So
I mean, we are family. We're friendly to families, but my kids have never listened to my podcast.
My children will not listen to this for many years.
Yeah.
All right. Fair enough.
No.
Well, we are live on Facebook. So Natalie, go ahead and kick us off.
Okay. All right. Tonight we are thrilled to be joined by Chris Shelton. Chris grew up in Scientology and spent 25 years actively working for it at its highest levels. Having escaped in 2013, he's been an outspoken critic and anti-cult advocate ever since. He's chronicled his recovery from Scientology on his blog, The Critical Thinker at Large, and on his YouTube channel. So welcome, Chris.
Hello. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you for joining us. So, Scientology. We have not talked about this before on the show, and we are very excited to have you. And a special thank you to John Stewart, who we talked to, I guess, a couple weeks ago for introducing you to us. So, John, you're awesome. Thank you for the intro. So we're obviously going to want to hear a lot about your story, but I would love to kind of start with, what is Scientology and what do Scientologists believe?
Sure. Okay, good. You can hear me okay and everything?
Yeah.
Yes.
Excellent. Okay, good. Okay, so Scientology is, well, it's a money-making scam, is what it really is. However, if you want to know what Scientologists will tell you what it is, or what they put out there as to what it is, it's an applied religious philosophy that has techniques and methods for improving a person's life, giving them a toolbox to deal with the problems and situations of life and livingness, and allow for spiritual growth and personal development, which is
sounds like a lot of word salad.
Well, this is what they say. Now, what this is heading towards is not just a sort of feel-good thing, but it actually has very specific goals and things you're supposed to be able to accomplish, which is supposed to lead you to through a journey to personal spiritual immortality. And so they're they don't think small. They think big. So the idea is to achieve it's East meets West in terms of Eastern philosophy meeting Western practicality, and so it's not just some mystic faith-based belief sort of thing, or think good karmic thoughts and all will be well. But it's actually, if you do A and B and C and D in this order, then we will guarantee that you will achieve a state of cause over life, and you will be in a place where you have personal certainty and full understanding of your vast spiritual nature and a return of your spiritual abilities thereby.
So it'll just solve everything in your life. Basically,
yes. The idea with Scientology is that it is an all-encompassing thing. L. Ron Hubbard actually said in one place that Scientology is the one thing that is senior to life because it explains all of life. So, and that is a nice little word trickery to give his adherents the idea that Scientology is the single most important thing in their life, bar none, period, end of story. There is nothing else that they should be doing or thinking or contributing to that really matters. Scientology is really it. And this is why when you know that, the old Tom Cruise video where he's making some fairly inane and insane sounding comments actually starts making sense if you are looking at Scientology the way he's looking at it, which is that it is the be all end all of existence.
So it's just everything. And so, so L. Ron Hubbard, can we talk about him a little bit? Because
sure.
he's the guy,
He's the man.
He's the man. He was a science fiction writer that was just like, let's
right.
we're not
debating that at all, right?
Okay, so he, all right. L. Ron Hubbard was born in 1911 in, I think, Tilden, Nebraska, if I'm remembering right. He's a Midwest guy. He grew up in the Midwest. He went to, he managed as a child to have an interesting life in terms of his travel. Traveled around to the Panama Canal, went over to the Orient, went around in the United States a bit, especially in the West as a child. Very active imagination and writer. He was developing writing skills pretty early on. He kept a diary and he kept journals, and then he started in his 20s, started writing stories during the Depression era. 1920s and 30s, he made his name as a pulp writer, and then he joined the military. Come World War II, right before World War II was declared, he had signed up, and he was a captain in a boat. He was a commander. Then the war ended, and he came out of the Navy and was sort of traipsing around in Southern California, which is where I grew up in Pasadena, and met a guy named Jack Parsons, who was a rocket scientist at JPL at the time. Got involved in the occult in Aleister Crowley's work, the OTO, the Ordo Templi Orientis, and started doing sex magic with Jack Parsons. They were doing some rituals and stuff. He managed to abscond with Jack Parsons' girlfriend, Sarah, and about a few $1,000 from a business venture that they were going to do, where Hubbard had conned him out of a bunch of money. They took off to Florida. Jack Parsons tried to catch up with him, get his money back, couldn't get his money back, but definitely got him to, stop taking him for a ride. And then a couple of years later, Hubbard, with the help of some other folks, including, what was his name? John Campbell. I can never remember if it's Jack Campbell or John Campbell. I think it was John Campbell from Astounding Science Fiction. He was the editor of Astounding Science Fiction, and he was kind of backing Hubbard, gave him a place to stay out in the East Coast. And Hubbard whipped out this subject of Scientology, of Dianetics. Started with a couple of articles about it, claimed to have been doing a bunch of research, which is pretty unsubstantiated, and proposed this new mental health science, which is Dianetics, the modern science of mental health. Came out May 9th, 1950. And then that's the beginning of the whole story, really, of Dianetics and Scientology. But Hubbard's story was one of kind of bouncing around unsuccessfully in his life. He was a successful writer to the degree that he was a very fast writer, and he could write a lot of stories in a very short amount of time when he put his mind to it. But he had a hard time focusing. He had a hard time putting his mind to it to create a quality career. When you look back at his pulp fiction, it's really pretty crappy stuff. Even when I was in Scientology, I didn't like reading his stuff, because I'm a writer and I would read it and just go, oh my God, this is awful. He did manage through all of his work. He was an extremely prolific writer, and he did manage to come up with a couple stories that have some long-term value. There was one called Fear, which Stephen King praised. It's a horror story. There was another one called Final Blackout, which is kind of an interesting story about a post-apocalyptic world. And then, of course, later in life, he wrote Battlefield Earth and then the Mission Earth series in the 1980s. So the guy could write. He was a writer, and he took those skills into Dianetics and Scientology, and man, did he write a lot of stuff. I mean, there's just volumes and volumes of material in Dianetics and then in Scientology, and a lot of lectures. He gave something on the order of 4,000 to 5,000 recorded lectures over the span from 1950 through to the early 1980s. Most of those recorded lectures for the public and the stuff that actually is available ends off in the 70s, because he went into hiding from the law in the 70s and actually in the late 60s and early 70s, and he never really resurfaced in the public venue. after that. So he wasn't doing events and congresses and things like he had been doing in the 50s and 60s. So interesting guy. And, you know, it's probably better to focus on any specific questions you have, because I could talk about this guy like this for another hour. Easily, you know?
Well,
there's so much.
Dan, you brought up the thing about the letter and the mental health stuff. So regarding
like you said, there's just so much there. So like, I don't know. I mean, as far as Scientology, I know that part is bullshit, but I mean, it's hard to discern like what's true and what's not when you have somebody who's like making up stories about himself and his military career. I should say that he really was an amazing liar. He was pathological. He really was. And some people caught on to it and other people didn't who met him, because he had, for whatever, you know, I never met the man personally, of course. So he died when I was 16 years old. But I talked to a lot of people over the years who did meet him, who did know him, who worked with him closely. Mm-hmm. And while I was in Scientology, I would always, you know, if I ever met anybody who knew him, I'd sit him down and tell me all about him, you know. And then after I left, I've talked to a few people who also worked with him. And he had a presence. He had a charisma. He is not a physically amazing looking guy. And as he aged in years, he kind of got worse and worse as far as his appearance goes, but he had a magnetism. He had a charisma that was absolutely undeniable. When he went into a room, you knew he was in the room. He was an overbearing, tall guy. He had a presence to him. And so that attracted people to him. And he was a womanizer. He was actually I never get the word on this one right, bigamist. He was married to 2 women at the same time for about a year. Okay. Mm-hmm. That's that woman, Sarah, that he absconded with with Jack Parsons' girlfriend. Hubbard was married when he did that. And he ran off with Sarah to Florida, and then he married her while he still had a wife and kids in Port Orchard, Washington. So he would have had some interesting moral fiber to him. But he was renowned for telling tall tales. I mean, once you got to know him for a while, you started seeing through some of his nonsense. But he was really good at it. And so he told stories about himself, about his Navy career. And where it's relevant to the Dianetics story is he specifically said that he had war wounds, that he had been in an explosion, that he had suffered blindness, that he was actually lame, and that he had used the techniques he discovered while studying at Oak Knoll Naval Hospital in California. He claimed that he was laid up there for about 9 months or a year. He studied neurology and medicine and this sort of thing at their medical library. Now, none of this happened, but he said all of this happened, right? And that he discovered, the tenets of Dianetics, and that he cured himself. And based on that work, he did more case studies over the next couple of years and formulated the techniques of Dianetics. Now, the reason that's really, really relevant to Dianetics is not only because the whole thing is based on that story, but because if you show that story is a lie, which is pretty easy to do now that we have all of his records, it invalidates all of it. And the last church spokesman, who actually was a church spokesman, Tommy Davis, got busted and is gone now because he said that. He said, well, if Ron didn't cure himself, then that invalidates all of Dianetics, and that means it's all a fake. As a spokesman, you don't want to paint yourself in a corner like that, and he did. And that was just the latest of his, a string of faux pas he made that got him ousted as the public spokesman. And there hasn't been a public spokesman for Scientology since. I think that was around 2011. So,
well, it has to be hard to keep all of this stuff straight and say everything right, and because there's so much.
Yeah, it's hard to do that.
Because there's so many. How do you do it? Yeah. It's a lot.
I mean, we can look at Sean Spicer and see how real that struggle is.
That's right. That's a very good comparison, actually. Because the church has a whole, the word is hagiography, the revised version of L. Ron Hubbard's life, when you have a religious leader, and all cults do this, all religions do this, which is why there's a word for it, hagiography, the revised life story of the founder or prophet, right, is referred to as the hagiography. And there is one for L. Ron Hubbard. There's a church biography, there's a church version of all of the events of his life. And most people in the church, myself included when I was in, don't question it, don't wonder about it, don't fact check it, and therefore accept it as the real version of events. But the files and the information and the evidence you can find tells an entirely different story than what L. Ron Hubbard himself claimed about his life. And that is only available to people when they're willing to look and do a little fact checking. All the information is out there, but Scientologists generally aren't willing to look. So,
well, and even to that end, there's, I guess, maybe we're talking back in like the 2010 and a little bit before that, where it seemed like every popular actor, actress in Hollywood was promoting Scientology, or it was somehow it got in, and they're like, this is like the shit. I love this. And so, I mean, like, how does that happen? Like, how do these people who, like, we're not, on the whole, we're not looking at them for, to be like great philosophers or anything like that. But how does like these are not stupid people. You don't get that far in life and be that successful.
Well, you'd actually be amazed. Actually, you'd be a little surprised. I mean, celebrities are not naturally inherently smart people. They're not really any different than you and me. They just happen to look good or sound good in front of a camera. So they have a skill set that lends itself to that. But actors are people first. And
right.
If you look at Gwyneth Paltrow.
I look at her all the time.
Yeah.
Vagina eggs.
That's the topic of another podcast.
Way too much. Yeah.
I love Gwyneth Paltrow in Iron Man movies. She's wonderful. Pepper Potts, and she's awesome. And that's a character she plays, right? She did a good job singing and I think this movie called Duets or something with Huey Lewis and some other people, right? Like, great. But that's not Gwyneth Paltrow. Gwyneth Paltrow is cray-cray. I mean, she has crazy ideas about health and science.
She got some issues, yeah.
So you go, okay, well, how's that, right? It's no different. Pseudoscience appeals to people who do not have good critical thinking skills and who do not take the time to study and learn what they're talking about. And so, and unfortunately, there's so much woo out there and so much pseudoscience out there. And Dianetics and Scientology falls 1000% in that barrel or bucket of pseudoscience. It sounds good to a layperson. I think it was Neil deGrasse Tyson who recently was on Joe Rogan. He said something about, the trick is that you get people who learn, who know enough to learn stuff, but don't know enough to know what they don't know. Mm-hmm. And they don't find out, right? And maybe it's kind of related to Dunning-Kruger a little bit, right? But that's what these actors fall into. And actually, fortunately, not a lot of actors are actually involved in Scientology. Tom Cruise is the big name. John Travolta was the big name in the 70s and 80s, and he's still there. He's still present. And there was Jenna Elfman, but who knows who she is anymore. She's like kind of, D-list, right? And there's Kirstie Alley, but she's same thing. I mean, she was big for a while, and now she's just kind of her own joke, right? You get
Isn't Beck a Scientologist?
Beck is a Scientologist, yes, but very, very quiet about it.
Okay.
Right?
Oh,
very
I didn't know that.
Yeah, no, he doesn't really talk about it hardly at all.
Now you just ruined my childhood.
Laura Prepon from Orange is the New Black, right? She's a Scientologist.
Yeah.
So there are, there's a few of them, but it's not like they're rampant through the industry. And there's also stars who have tried Scientology, or they tried to get them in, and they didn't go for it. I mean, Brad Pitt, Russell Crowe. I mean, these guys have brushed around it, and they were like, yeah, no, those guys are crazy. Elvis. I mean, they tried. Elvis's wife got it. Priscilla Presley and Lisa Marie got into Scientology. Elvis was like, yeah, those son of bitches are only after your money. I mean, Elvis spotted it.
He's like, just no.
Yeah, he was like, hell no, you people stay away from me, right? But Priscilla fell into it. Well, she's out now, and so was Lisa Marie, right? So they can, Jason Lee was another actor who was in. Now he's out. So people do get in and go out too, right? But it has an appeal, and they're very good at, when I present it to you, I'm presenting it in a sort of a satirical way. So I'm sort of rolling my eyes and talking to you about it. But I recruited people into it. I mean, and it's not necessarily hard to do with a certain type of person. If you have what's called a ruin in Scientology, they're looking for your ruin. They're looking for the thing that you're going to tell them is ruining your life. It's my marriage, it's my job, it's my relationship with my kids, it's whatever it is. I can't handle money, blah, blah, blah. There's like 20 or 30 different ruins that are pretty common for everybody. And you find out what that is, and you get the person into a position where they're willing to talk to you about it. And then you get them into a position where you present them with a solution to that problem. You say, look, we can solve that. We can absolutely deal with that so it's no longer ruining your life. And at that point, a person's in a state of mind where they're looking for help and they're looking for a solution, and Scientology is claiming it has it. And so they pays their money and they start on the road. That's how that works.
That's it. And there you go.
And it's the same drill with celebrities, just to circle back to that. They're people, they have ruins, they have uncertainties, they have problems, and Scientology offers them a solution to those problems. And as it unfolds in a person's life, as a person gets more and more deeply involved, it becomes more and more pervasive and more controlling of their life. And that's why the control factor and the weird authoritarianism that starts entering in is why we say, look, it's actually a destructive cult, because it takes you a place that is way beyond common sense.
Now, did you grow up in Scientology?
Yeah, I'm second gen. Yeah. So my parents were involved when I was. They got involved when I was 4 years old. Mm-hmm. They were divorced when I was 2. They got remarried because of Scientology. So I had growing up, I had a very vested interest in supporting Scientology. Plus, it was the religion I grew up with. I mean, you have to. It's the rare person, it's the exceptional person who bucks their parents and bucks the system. When you're raised with it, and I was raised with it. I was raised with the lingo. I was raised with the concepts of it. And then when I was 15 years old is when I actually started officially doing my services, because they found my ruin. I went into the local church when I was 15 at my dad's suggestion. He said, just go check it out. I said, okay. I did one of those personality tests. They sat me down, and I was a 15-year-old shy, nerdy kid. And the woman who, and I'm thinking as a 15-year-old teenage boy that I'm hiding all of this really good, right?
Yeah. You're all so cool and like just,
oh yeah, you don't know anything about me, right? And then they do this personality test, and she sits down and she goes, well, it looks like you're kind of shy and you have a hard time talking to girls, right? And this is like cold reading practically. It's like a warm reading.
Every 15-year-old ever.
Oh my God, exactly, right? It did not occur to me for years how transparent I was as a 15-year-old, right? Or how common my ruin was. And I thought she was reading me like a book. I almost fell out of my chair that she was so good at spotting my issues, right? And then when she delivers this line, she goes, okay, so this is all ruining your life. And I'm like, yeah, I'm totally screwed up. I can't get a date. No girls will talk to me. This is between my sophomore and junior year of high school, right? So I'm like a mess socially. And she goes, well, we have a class that you can take that will handle that. And I'm like, you do? What? And she goes, yeah, we have this communications class, and if you take this class, you will get dates and you will talk to girls. Well, I was so sold
done
that I didn't even notice that after I took the class and more classes and kind of got really involved in it, that I wasn't getting any more dates and I wasn't becoming a ladies' man. And in fact, I left high school and I was still pretty nerdy, kind of geeky guy. And it took me a while to get a date actually, but my point is that I was so sold on the good of it because of what I was being told about it, that my ability to actually observe the factual basis of it and was kind of gone. And that's kind of interesting, really, that somebody could do that. But that's how it went.
And so then as you grew up, like kind of within the church and all of that, then did you later become one of those people who was getting people in and giving like personality tests and that kind of stuff? Was that you?
I joined staff when I was 17 years old. I started working for the Church Scientology of Santa Barbara, which is the church I had gone to because that's where we were living. And I did it right out of high school. Like I finished high school. I was going to go to college. I did college for 3 weeks and it was like, wow, this is high school, the sequel. I'm not really excited by this. So they said, well, we got a job for you. And I was like, oh, and they're like, oh yeah, we're going to train you. You're going to get all this Scientology for free. All you got to do is work for us. It's going to be wonderful. And 8 years later, I'm broke. I got, I've been slaving away for 8 years. I'm not making, they were paying me a really good week was $50, so I'm working other jobs to support myself. And then I joined the Sea organization when I was 25 years old. And I went down to LA and I worked there for another 17 years. And the Sea organization, of course, is their core elite paramilitary group that, is sort of Navy-like, and they have.
Is that really how they define and think? Like that's completely new to me. I don't know what this is.
The Sea Org?
Did you sign a billion-year contract?
Really? Oh yeah, I did. Yeah, I signed a billion-year contract.
Okay, cool.
Oh yeah,
they taking you to court for violating that.
Yeah, it's a symbolic thing. Everybody kind of knows it's symbolic, but it's no, the Sea Org is a lifelong commitment. You're 24/7 working for Church Scientology. You are the core group of Scientology, and it is a paramilitary group. They act like a little Navy. They have ranks and ratings and insignia and uniforms, and they salute each other and call their seniors sir. And it's a very disciplined group. And it's 24/7. It's not like an 8-hour-a-day job. You go there, and you are in communal living. Dorm style, men's dorms, women's dorms. If you get married, you get your own room. You don't get your own apartment, you get your own room.
There's some incentive.
Oh yeah. So communal, it is an incentive, believe me. A lot of young people, like they've been, people in the Sea Org have been married 4 or 5 times because you cannot have sex at all until you're married, right? No sexual relations. So, and that's just one of the many rules in the Sea Org. And they work flat out. You get it at the best case scenario is you get a day off once every 2 weeks. And that really doesn't happen very often. The last 5 years.
What are you doing? You say you're working like 24/7. Like, what are you doing?
All kinds of things. The Sea organization is responsible for church management. So all of the city level churches that you see, like Los Angeles or Denver or Milano or Keokuk or wherever, those churches are staffed by people who sign contracts that go for 2.5 or 5 years. They do a stint and then they're done, or they re-sign another contract. When the Sea Org, you're the rest of your life. And those are higher level churches within the hierarchy of the church that manage those city level churches. So for example, the first thing I did for the first 8 years that I was in the Sea Org was I was managing churches of Scientology all across the Western United States. I was telling them what to do on a weekly basis based on their production and based on the reports that we would get from them. And it's all very set up system. There's telexes and emails and computers and all this stuff for all this communication and production statistics, and it's a whole system. And I did that for 8 or 9 years until I got completely burned out doing that. Very, very high pressure kind of situation, constantly being demanded for money and for new members, and to service the existing members and get them involved more and more. No one's ever involved in Scientology enough. You know, you want people in the classrooms and in the counseling rooms 24/7. You want them like, going up the bridge, you know, paying their money and getting up that bridge to total freedom, which basically means doing service after service after service to achieve that level of personal spiritual immortality and freedom that I was talking about. So that's sort of the game of Scientology. And when you're in it, it's very high pressure. There's a lot of, you know, because they're convinced through the writings and lectures of L. Ron Hubbard that the world is going to hell in a handbasket very, very quickly. And Scientology is the only thing that can save it. And they are 1,000% convinced of that.
I was on board until we got to Scientology is the only thing that can save it.
No, it's very us versus them. There's a reason. We're kind of wandering all over, but it's totally cool. There's a reason it's referred to as a destructive cult, and one of those reasons, in terms of characteristics of a destructive cult, is that it develops an us versus them, black and white mentality, right? You're either with us or you're against us.
I think that's not necessarily exclusive to that, though. I could see how we can make an argument that it's more destructive, but even you see that in Christianity too, where they say, well, it's the war on Christmas, or Christians are the most persecuted, or even in in Islam they'll say, well, we're trying to police how like Muslims are trying to police how Muslim men and women dress. But I absolutely see what you're saying, where it's like you said, it's not about the message necessarily. It's about just get more members, get more money, and okay, that's great. Now do it again, and keep doing it. And now do it more.
Right. It's not like your run-of-the-mill Christianity or even your run-of-the-mill Islam, but it is like extremist sects of Christianity and Islam. It is like the Westboro Baptists. It is like Islamic jihadists. It's that mindset. And so you wouldn't accurately refer to Christianity as a destructive cult, but you would refer to the Westboro Baptists as a destructive cult. And one of the reasons for that is that characteristic of developing an us versus them mentality, where our group is the only group that really matters. We are the only ones who have the truth with a capital T. We're the only ones who actually, or in the case of the Westboro Baptists, for example, we're the only ones who have the Word of God, right? That we're the ones who know the sacred knowledge, right? And it's our duty and mission to get that knowledge out to everybody else, but we're going to be resisted. We're going to be fought. There are going to be people who are trying to stop us. And for them, it is a situation of no mercy. They are the ones who are destroying mankind. They are the ones who must be destroyed. And if they get in our way, they're in our crosshairs, and any method necessary to get them out of our way is justified. That's the mindset. And it's an extremist mindset, and that is the mindset of a Scientologist.
I don't think that's too far off from like even evangelical, like the religious right. I don't think that's too far off, because they have that where they say we are we have people. However, I don't know how birth control works. So every time you have sex, obviously you have to use birth control. So I don't want to pay for your birth control and things like that, where they're actually creating these laws. And so I absolutely see what you're saying and agree with you that, this is a destructive cult. Christianity, I would say, is not as destructive, or maybe more socially accepted destruction than that. But I see a lot of similarities between the two of those, with how even maybe not even so much as the extremists like Westboro Baptist Church, how they interact and how they try to accomplish their agenda no matter what. And like with Pence in Indiana, he literally just changed the rules of how the state board of education works in Indiana, because he didn't like who we as voters elected. So I see a lot of similarities there, but I agree with you that Scientology is batshit crazy, but this in Christianity and what they're doing and the extremists and things like that are maybe like 90% as crazy with how they're going about things.
Well, the only point I'm trying to make is it's a matter of degree.
Mm-hmm.
And that matter of degree is important. And it's not, because we need to avoid, in talking about this, it's a nuanced conversation.
Right.
To paint all of religion in a black and white brush is a dangerous place to go. And so that's why I'm careful with my words when I talk about this sort of thing, because because Christianity is a belief system that Christ is Lord, you accept Jesus as your personal Savior, and you're going to go to heaven. That belief all by itself doesn't lend itself to extremism. Extremism is a thing that's developed. It's created by people. There are cult leaders who inculcate this mentality in their followers. And you can certainly have, within the world of Christianity or Islam or even Buddhism, you can have a particular person who will create this mindset in a small number of their followers, or even a large number of their followers, but it's not all of them. And so I differentiate those two things, and I think it's an important differentiation to make, because otherwise, if you start painting all of Christianity in the broad brush of it's all a destructive cult because there are some extremists in that group, you are actually making a mistake, and you're labeling people who are not extremists that way. And that's the only reason why I'm
right. And I was, and I might not have been clear. I was speaking more to the, what we would call the religious right, evangelical, basically people like Mike Pence, who I don't know. We never met. I really don't like Mike Pence, and we could talk about this for another.
It's all good. I'm tracking. I'm tracking on what you're saying, and you're right that that though the religious right, so to speak, are moving in that direction. If you were going to put it on a spectrum, right? They are not your turn the other cheek Christians, right? They're more hardcore about it. I'm going to make the case about a destructive cult with a series of characteristics about that group. Black and white thinking is only one of those characteristics. Us versus them mentality is a related characteristic, but there are others. For example, one of the other characteristics of a destructive cult is they tend to have a real fixation on money or sex, for example, right? The cult leader uses the group for that purpose of making money or getting sex or power. I don't know that Mike Pence is doing that particularly. I wouldn't call him.
He won't even eat dinner alone with another woman. So.
Oh no, I know, but it's not about the beliefs, it's about their actions, and it's
right.
About,
no, I understand.
So anyway, but as far as Scientology goes, there is an extremist view, and I just want to kind of get back to that point, which is that L. Ron Hubbard wrote and said things that are without question. I mean, it's irrefutable that the man wanted Scientologists in a fervor about Scientology. He wanted them concerned and worried and upset about the state of the world. And he very much communicated that the only solution, period, was Scientology. That at the lower sort of PR level, Scientologists will tell you that they're open to people of other denominations, that it's a multi-denominational group, that you can be a Scientologist and be a Jewish or a Christian or whatever. That's bullshit, right? Because when you start getting into that Scientology group and you start listening to what Hubbard has to say about Christianity and the Christian God or the God of Islam even, he flat out calls it a myth. And he says that organized religion is pretty destructive stuff, of course, except for Scientology,
except for mine,
right? Except for us, right? Because we're the ones who have all the answers, right? And he makes it very, very clear that Scientology is a life or death matter, right? Those are the words that he uses. It's not a game or something cute or lack of something to do for lack of something better. the fate of every man, woman, and child on this planet for the next endless trillions of years depends on what you do here and now with and in Scientology.
Well,
Right?
trillion is more than billion. So, I mean, you got a couple contracts you can go through.
The other basis of Scientology, the fundamental belief of Scientology, is that you are an immortal spiritual being. So you are not your body. Your body is a possession of yours. That's a temporary affair. You have lived a near infinite amount of time into the past, and you are immortal. You are going to live into the future. So what Hubbard claims is that the quality of that existence is going to be as good as you take advantage of Scientology to salvage you as a spiritual being.
That sounds an awful lot like Buddhism.
Well, that's why I said it's East meets West. Hubbard pretended to take a lot of concepts out of Buddhism and merge them with Western practicality and science. And this is one of the, for somebody who doesn't, if you don't know a lot about Buddhism, then it would sound like that, right? Buddhism is actually radically different from Scientology in its basic philosophy,
yeah, absolutely. Right? I understand that part.
Yeah, but most Westerners actually don't get Buddhism, right? Like real Buddhism, like what it really is. You got to dig in a bit to find out. And so they have this sort of surface level understanding of Buddhism from what they see on TV or what they read in a magazine or something. And this is where people come into Scientology with that level of understanding of Buddhism, and they go, oh, this is just like Buddhism, except it has these practical things. And that's why L. Ron Hubbard can get away with saying crap like that, right? And so he presented this as a religious philosophy, and that's how they got 501c3 exemption and religious recognition, which gives them all kinds of rights in the courts and with taxes. And so that's how he pawned it off as a religion, right? And so getting back to the destructive cult part, you have that extremism of belief, and you have this, we are the only answer. So they are not tolerant of other beliefs. They are not tolerant of other views. And so like at the core, even though they might say things like, oh yeah, and this even extends out to LGBT, right? Where they'll say, oh yeah, we're tolerant of LGBT, right? And Laura Prepon can be on Orange is the New Black and play a lesbian, but you read L. Ron Hubbard's works, that is a perversion and a mental illness, and it is unacceptable behavior in the world of Scientology. You cannot be a homosexual Scientologist and expect to rise in the ranks and be given all of Scientology.
So what do they do? Like if somebody is in the church and is, identifies transgender or gay, lesbian, like what is there a treatment protocol, or do they just beat it out of you, or do they like what? I mean, we're laughing, but like that's not really a joke.
Oh no, it's actually not too funny. They try to Scientology counseling is called auditing. Okay. And that's the practice of sitting in a room and being asked a bunch of questions or being given various commands with that e-meter and, going through all these processes. They're sure that they can audit the gay away. And all you have to do is pay your money, right? Also, though, you are told early on that you have to knock it off. It's considered unethical behavior.
So just like I interact with my kids, hey, knock that shit off, like stop it.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. An ethics officer in a Scientology organization, there's a position of a person in every one of the churches, and the title is ethics officer, and their job is to enforce Hubbard's codes of ethics and conduct on all Scientologists, and that very much includes not practicing homosexuality. So if you come in saying, look, I'm homosexual, they're going to go, okay, great. And they'll start you off very slowly. Like you can do that communications class and nobody's going to give you any shit. You can do some beginning counseling. Nobody's going to mention it. Nobody's going to really talk about it too much. But as you get deeper into it, and once they feel safe in sitting you down and talking to you about it, and they're going to feel safe about that once they think you have accepted that this is really good shit and you want more of it, right? Scientology, then they're going to start putting the conditions on you, right? And one of those conditions is going to be, look, L. Ron Hubbard has this and this and this to say about homosexuality, and If you agree that L. Ron Hubbard knows what he's talking about, then you need to agree that L. Ron Hubbard knows what he's talking about with this too. And therefore, you need to knock it off. And while we know that you might still have urges and ideas that you are transgender, homosexual, bisexual, whatever, we want you to stop practicing it in the real world and just keep it in your head and trust us that as you do the auditing that we assign to you to do, that's going to be handled and it's going to go away and you're not going to feel that way anymore. Right? And if you were to break those rules and continue practicing your homosexuality or bisexuality or transgender activities, you would start getting in trouble with Scientology after that point.
Getting in trouble stuff.
Yeah.
Because that's a problem, right?
Yeah. And the trouble is going to consist of denying you auditing, denying you classes, and paying more money to do ethics handlings and what's called sec checking, which is where they start pulling out of you all of your heinous evil crimes and deeds, and recording all of it, right? And you're either going to get with the program, or you're going to be shown the door, and that's how that works for the LGBT community in Scientology.
So in general, I mean, you are living your life doing exactly what they tell you, or else consequences.
That's right.
And so that also extends to relationships with people who aren't within the church, right? Am I right with the idea of suppressive
yeah. Okay, so let's get into this. So part of the ethics is, okay. I mentioned earlier that any destructive cult has this us versus them mentality, right? This is true of all of them, whether you're in a martial arts cult or a religious cult or a political cult or whatever. Scientology is different from most other destructive cults in the volume of material and content and rules and guidelines. There are books and books of this stuff, just volumes of policies and bulletins and lectures and books and all kinds of stuff. It's very, very formalized, right? It's very, very structured. So part of that structure is that there are antisocial personalities in the world. And of course, all of us know that there are antisocial personalities in the world. I mean, it's no stretch of the imagination to find them. They're easy to see. Hitler, John Wilkes Booth. I mean, just criminals, just people in day-to-day life, serial killers. So you go, okay, there are antisocial personalities. And Hubbard has written bulletins and books and stuff about antisocial personalities and how, if you have an antisocial personality in your life, in Scientology, that person is referred to as a suppressive person because they're trying to suppress people. They're trying to hold them down, right? And they don't have to be serial killers with knives and guns and killing people in order to be an antisocial personality, right? This could be the person at your job who is secretly conniving to get you fired because they don't like you and are working against you. And every chance they get, they, complain to the boss about you and this kind of thing. So as far as you're concerned, that guy is a suppressive person because he's trying to suppress you, right? Mm-hmm. So in Scientology ethics, there's a whole series of steps that a person takes. This is where it gets weird. So
this is where it gets weird. Okay. This is the point.
I think what I've explained so far is actually fairly non-weird. I mean, there's bad people in the world and they work against you, right? I mean, I don't think that's particularly a weird idea. But Hubbard makes it weird when he says, if you are sick, whether it's a common cold or you come down with hepatitis or whether you get a fever, you are connected to a suppressive person somehow. Because all illness stems from a condition of being connected to a suppressive person. That's the only reason you get sick in the first place.
Denial of germ theory.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So, and originally in Dianetics, he ascribed this to mental phenomena called engrams, which are past moments of pain and unconsciousness. And he said, that's the reason you get sick. But then later on, he said, No, what really happens is you get connected to a suppressive person, and they sort of stimulate those bad traumatic incidents, and that's what makes you sick. So it's not necessarily like he's contradicting himself. He just sort of added to the mythology of it. So these suppressive people are bad because they make you sick. They make you have accidents. You get stupid around them. You act like an idiot. You know, like there's all these phenomena that occur around suppressive people. And so what you're supposed to do is if you get, like, let's say you're a Joe Scientologist and you walk into the church one day and you got a cold, right? You're blowing your nose and you're coughing. The ethics officer is going to go, hey, dude, come over here, right? And he's going to sit you down and he's going to go, let's look at your life and let's see who the suppressive person is, because you're sick. And that means there's some suppressive person either now or somebody's reminding you of a suppressive person that was in your past. So we're going to find out what that's all about. And they do an interview on you. And you have to find the SP. You have to find who this person is. Oh, it's my boss. He's giving me shit. He's giving me a hard time. And I don't know what to do about it. And so you're now labeled PTS. You are a potential trouble source. You're a source of trouble, right? Because you're connected to this suppressive person and you're not doing anything about it. So the suppressive person is ruining your life, and you're PTS. So here's your label, there you go. And if you're PTS, you can't be audited until you handle this PTS condition. So you are supposed to do one of two things. You are either supposed to handle this suppressive person so he's not suppressing you anymore, or if that doesn't work, you disconnect. You get that person out of your life. If that means that you have to quit your job and go get another job, then that's what you're going to do, because we got to get this guy out of your life, right? Now, if this suppressive person is the other part of being an antisocial personality is anyone who is against Scientology is a suppressive person. Right? Now, they don't have to be a criminal. They don't even have to necessarily be an evil, horrible person. But if they're against Scientology and they're encouraging you to stop being a Scientologist, and they're telling you it's a ripoff and a scam and something you shouldn't be doing, or somebody like me who comes out of Scientology and talks all about all the wonderful horribleness of it, I'm a suppressive person now. So no Scientologist can be connected to me. And so you have to disconnect from people who the church says are suppressive people. And so now we've taken this idea of trying to make your life a little bit better by not having people who are assholes in it. And now we've turned it into an authoritarian control system, where if the church says somebody is an SP, you have to disconnect from them. You have no choice in the matter. Not if you want to continue doing Scientology.
No, you isolate them from anybody that's offering any sort of disagreement, and it makes it a lot easier to deal with you.
Exactly. And the church will sell the person on why the suppressive person is such an evil, horrible person, even if this church has to lie about them to make the sale, right? Like, I was working for the Church of Scientology for 25 years. In that time, I made the church thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars, actually hundreds of thousands of dollars personally. Mm-hmm. I recruited people into the church. I salvaged and recovered people back into the church. I mean, we're talking hundreds of people. And I did a lot of work over that 25 years. However, I am painted out now to be a total bad guy. And I wasn't a bad guy until the day I started posting on the internet critical remarks about Scientology. And as soon as I did that, I was a suppressive person, no matter how much good I did. And I lost my fiance, and I lost friends that I had for over 20 years. And I just lost a whole bunch of people that were very important to me. And this all happened back in 2013 because of this disconnection thing. So the whole SP thing, like I mentioned, goes from something that kind of makes sense to something that's really twisted and sick and evil. And anyone can be subject to disconnection, to being labeled a suppressive person at any time by the Church of Scientology officially, if they don't do what the Church of Scientology tells them to do, right? If they don't toe the line. Now, the Church of Scientology isn't going to officially label your Aunt Mamie a suppressive person with a letter and call her up and say, you're a suppressive person.
Yeah.
They're only going to do that when you're already a Scientologist and they're kicking you out, which is what they did to me, right? They gave me a call and they said, yeah, you're declared, you're a suppressive person, and you're out of here, and you've now lost everybody who's important to you, and we don't care. And there you go. So that's how that works.
So then, okay, you were in the church for decades. You did you did all this work. This was your life.
Yep.
What was your moment, or was it a series of moments that led you to say, I'm done?
It was a long series of incidents. It was really sort of 10 years in the making. I'm a slow learner. I'm the first to get all critical with myself about it, right? I mean, I should have, seen what was going on a long time before it did. But there's a lot of fact twisting and thought twisting that goes on in Scientology that makes it all seem like it's your fault. If you're having critical thoughts about the church or about its leadership, it's on you. It's not on the church, right? And the teachings of L. Ron Hubbard were very carefully calculated to make it that way. So it took me a long time to undo that and kind of get myself out of that, mind screwery. It started around 2002, 2003 with some things that happened when I was getting burned out as a manager, like I mentioned earlier. I was starting to see that the organizational structure of the thing was not conducive to achieving the church's goals, or stated goals, I should say. It's very conducive to achieving its actual goals of making money. But it's not so conducive to ridding the world of insanity, war, and criminality, which is what the stated goals of Scientology are. They're doing a very piss poor job of that. They're doing a great job of making money, right? So I started having doubts and concerns, but I blamed it on myself. And it took me 10 years. A series of things happened, which are probably too long to explain, but short version is, one day I realized that I was actually having to tell more lies on a daily basis than I was telling truth in order to convince people to do Scientology or come back into Scientology or recruit them for Scientology. And I don't like being a liar. So that was a little bit of a startling revelation one day when I was like, hey, wait a minute, what have I become? And the other, some of the other things were that I was sort of martyring myself for the cause. And it kind of hit me one day that that's what was happening. And I didn't want to be a martyr. I wanted to live a successful, happy life. And so I wanted a family. I wanted my own life. I wanted to actually partake of Scientology. And I wasn't able to do that when I was working for it because I was too busy working all the time. Right. So, so I didn't really dig on that. And also the intense concentration on money became so obvious. I couldn't ignore it anymore, and I didn't start working for Scientology because I thought that it was all about money, but it morphed over those 25 years. And so it just became such a blatant money grab that I was like, wow, this isn't really what I signed up for, so I hit the eject button.
And then here you are, talking about it.
Oh, finally, I should say the thing that actually got me, all those things I was just telling you about are the things that got me to stop working for Scientology. The thing that got me out of Scientology was when I went down the rabbit hole of the internet. Because another reason, and this is an important one, as to why Scientology is a destructive cult, is information control. You can't go on the internet as a Scientologist and look at information that's critical of Scientology. That's a crime in Scientology. You will get in a lot of trouble for doing that.
And what happens? What, you say a lot of trouble, what are they outside of secluding you into a...
No, they'll kick you out. They'll declare you a suppressive person just for looking at stuff on the internet.
Wow.
So especially lately, about the last 7 or 8 years, they really started circling the wagons on that, because the internet is Scientology's Vietnam.
It's the fight they can't win, right?
Yeah, because it's all out there.
Exactly. In the 1950s and 1960s, 1970s, 80s, 90s, there was no internet.
Yeah.
So all of their tactics for dealing with criticism worked. But with the internet, all of it is out there. All the confidential stuff is there. All of Hubbard's confidential writings, not just the Xenu crap. I'm talking about Hubbard's confidential writings about how to deal with critics. Because there's some nasty stuff he wrote about dealing with people who were critical of Scientology. I mean, he was, you want to talk about an extremist, and David Miscavige, the guy who took over for him, he's even worse. So the disconnection thing rips apart families. It rips up friendships. It rips apart businesses. I mean, it's pretty fucked up stuff. But this other stuff I'm talking about is called fair game. And that's where they go after their critics. They call their critics fair game. They're fair game for whatever we want to dish at them. And if that means we ruin their lives because they dared to speak out about Scientology, then that's what we're going to do. And Hubbard very much endorsed that, right? And they'll hire private investigators, and they'll Scientologists and lawyers, and they'll come after you, and they'll do all kinds of crazy stuff. It was much worse in the 80s and 90s. They have really been defanged by the internet and by the exposure that the internet provides. But that information control is all the more important for their little world in order for them to maintain their control of their membership. So the whole time I was in Scientology, coming back to me here, I didn't look at the internet.
Mm-hmm.
I was going to say, like, are you even allowed to have a cell phone or like?
No, not as a Sea Org member. As a public Scientologist, you can, but as a Sea Org member working 24/7 and stuff, the control is amazing. I mean, they have full control of your life. So they don't provide you with internet access, right? It was only through a series of events that were very unusual that I was able to peek at the internet at all. And that started cluing me into a couple things, but you self-police because you know that all your secrets are subject to church scrutiny when you go into your counseling sessions, and you are trained to not have secrets from the church.
Wow.
So you police yourself to not look at things that are critical of Scientology. Well, after I stopped working 24/7 for them, and they started treating me a little strangely and a little harshly, which I didn't really appreciate, I went on the internet because I had full internet access. I had my own apartment. I had my own laptop. I had my own internet connection. I was like, let's check this out. And
I heard of that internet there.
Yeah. And this all happened in Minnesota when I moved out there after I left the Sea Org. And it took me 3 months of deep diving, finding out all about the real life of L. Ron Hubbard. The fact that David Miscavige was beating on people, right? The fact that L. Ron Hubbard was a lying scumbag, right? He was bigamist. I mean, all those things I learned after coming out of working for the church.
And when you say beating on people, do you mean like literally or?
Literally.
I mean literally. David Miscavige is the head of the Church of Scientology, and he has been accused by no less than, 20 people of beating on them, physically assaulting them. Within the Sea Org, within the world of the Sea Org. He works at the international base in San Jacinto, California, which is a confidential location. Scientologists don't know where that is. Everybody else in the world does, but Scientologists don't. And that base, that gold international base, is where he lives, and the people who live and work there are subject to his punishments, and his punishments include physical assault. So he's been known to beat up on people, and I've met those people because they left the Sea Org. They were like, screw this. And they're friends of mine. I talk to them. I mean, I don't have any doubts that this is true. But at the time, first coming out of the church, I had all kinds of doubts about this being true. I didn't want to believe that. Mm-hmm. And I mean, David Miscavige is revered in Scientology, in the world of Scientology. He's the savior, right? So to think this guy's beating up on people and is an authoritarian dictator, I mean, these were not pleasant things for me to learn about. And I was furious to learn
that I had been being lied to for all those years. I don't even have words to describe how pissed off I was.
Oh yeah, I can't even imagine.
Yeah, I mean, I'd wasted 25 years of my life. I mean, this was a big, big, big moment in my life. 2013 was not a fun year for me, and I, as you know, you have me on here right now. You can tell I talk, you know, and I'm not shy about talking. And so when I found out that I had been, you know, the betrayal and the level of deception that had occurred, I wanted to expose that, you know, and it was very, very hard for me to keep my mouth shut because I was trying to play nice with the church, even after I learned all this stuff, because of my fiance, who was a Scientologist, and her whole family were Scientologists. So I was in a very, very tough position of having learned the truth about the group and what it was really up to. And yet the person that I loved at the time and her whole family were hardcore believers, right? And so I was trying to walk this line of, what am I going to do about this? But I was so upset about what I learned, I needed to vent. And so I got online anonymously and I started venting. And I didn't particularly appreciate how closely the Church of Scientology monitors the internet.
Oh.
And they figured out who I was, even though I was posting anonymously.
Wow.
And by what I was saying and how I was saying it. They are really kind of
good.
Crazy.
They're, wow.
Yeah, they were good.
Yeah.
And they figured it out and they confronted me on it. And I got busted and I got declared a suppressive person and I lost her and everyone. That's how that all went down.
Wow. Well, and that seems to be the common theme with everybody that we talk to, people who have left like the Jehovah's Witness faith or left Islam, or like you lose a lot by leaving.
Yep.
And
right.
And that's probably what compels people to stay often, right? Is that connection and family and loved ones. I mean, and so I think it takes a certain kind of bravery, in a sense, to leave this kind of thing.
Yeah, it's a rough go. You know, no question about it. You know, Leah Remini left. You know, talking about celebrities, and she took her whole family with her. Like, she did it right. She set it up. You know, she actually lined up everything, and then they all left together. And otherwise, she would have lost all of them because her mother was highest level Scientologist. Her husband was a Scientologist, right? Her in-laws. I mean, she had all these family members who, you know, she would have lost if she hadn't played it smart.
And now, I mean, now she's out there with the TV shows, book, like just trying to like blow the lid off of all of it.
That's right.
And so it's all out there. I mean, between that and like the Going Clear book and HBO documentary, like there's exposure of all of this kind of fucked upness in Scientology.
It's really good. And it's way high time that there is. And this is the kind of exposure that needs to happen with all these groups, because there's a lot of them out there. I mean, it's estimated about 5,000 destructive cults in the world. And, you know, and extremist Islam is, you know, just one of them. So it needs that kind of exposure, and people need to know how it works, how people get sucked into this in the first place. Because the mistake that way too many people make is they watch something from me or from Leah or from Mike Rinder or whoever about Scientology, and they point fingers and they go, well, those people were stupid. I would never fall for that. And they literally have no idea what they're talking about, because I'll tell you right now that the guy who thinks he was impenetrable and couldn't be sold was the first guy I wanted to talk to when I was bringing people into Scientology, because they're so easy to deal with and hook in, you know, if you know how to do it. So there's nobody who's immune from being conned or fooled. It's just a matter of what group is going to do it. Maybe Scientology isn't the group that's going to do it for you, but the Jehovah's Witnesses are, or Trump supporters. I don't know. I mean, any of these groups get pretty, cult-like. So, so anybody can fall for this stuff. And the more you learn about it, the more you find out how ubiquitous it is.
Yeah. And so, kind of that being said, we obviously want to, I guess, promote critical thinking as much as possible, right? And
yes.
And I mean, we've talked about that so much in the,
not just for breakfast anymore.
Yeah, oh, that's so good.
My shirt.
Because that's awesome.
The people listening to this on the actual podcast aren't going to get the visual.
A shirt.
No, that's my shirt. That's what
there's a shirt.
Critical thinking, man.
But
I'm all about it.
We talked about it so much. We talk about it all the time, but so much since the fact that Donald Trump got elected president of the United States, and people voted for him and didn't really exhibit critical thinking. But how to kind of wrap up, how do we promote that? How do we help people think rationally?
Well, critical thinking it's a whole, education skill set, right? So, I mean, it really is going to take teaching it in school. It's going to take teaching it on the internet. I mean, I've made a lot of videos about critical thinking. I'm doing one right now about flat earthers.
Oh.
Yeah, literally. When we're done with this, I'm going to finish that video because
we've been going for about an hour and a half now. I think we can broadcast live up to 8 hours. So we gotta...
Well, no, but I'm just saying that critical thinking is a very, very valuable skill. It's something I knew nothing about until I got out of Scientology and I started reading Carl Sagan, James Randi, Penn and Teller. I mean, at Michael Shermer, I got hooked up with skeptic.com. I mean, these were all resources I found coming out of Scientology. Mm-hmm. And I'll tell you, reading Carl Sagan's Demon Haunted World, I mean, that was an epiphany for me. My whole world changed as a result of that. We need to popularize that and normalize critical thinking, make it the thing to do. But there's a lot to it because it's not just talking, it's not like, okay, critical thinking, great, I'm a critical thinker, okay. Because every conspiracy theorist and every flat earther is convinced that they are critical thinkers.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous. You can use the jargon of critical thinking and still be a complete dupe.
Yes.
There's an attitude to critical thinking that's probably the most important things about critical thinking are the attitude of it. And the attitude is not a challenging, I'm going to buck the system, the status quo has it all wrong and then they're all screwed and I'm the critical thinker because I can think outside the box. People like that don't even understand what the status quo is. They haven't bothered to take the time to learn. It's taking the time to say, I don't know. It's taking the time to realize that, you need to learn. and
that it's okay to not know things.
What's that?
And that it's okay to not know things.
Yeah, exactly. That it's okay. The three most important words in critical thinking are I don't know. And really having an attitude that it's acceptable to do that. It's very hard because in our modern world, especially in the US, these are dirty words, man. If you don't know, you're made fun of in grade school. You are ridiculed. You're ignorant. You're a dope. You get called all these names because you don't know something. We really need to deal with that, right? Because it's a completely backwards attitude to have about knowledge and learning. So we got some work to do on that.
Yes, we definitely do.
We should probably wrap this up since we went about a half hour over what we were anticipating here.
I hope that's okay. I'm sorry if I talked too much.
Oh, no,
it is absolutely.
We'd love to have you back to talk even more about this sometime because this is this is fascinating. It's a whole rabbit hole.
It is
right because one of the questions I wanted to know. Again, we don't have time to go into this now, so this is what we call a tease, I guess. If you'll come back, we want to know. We want to talk about what Scientologists think of the creation of Earth and if it's a creationist meets Alien crazy world or something really cool I don't even know about.
Oh my God, so much to tell you.
I should say my knowledge of that is the South Park episode they did about Scientology, and it flashed on the screen. This is what they really believe, so it has to be true, or else, because TVs can't lie. But also, let's just
say that the South Park episode is about 1/10 of the actual story.
Oh, so we need to have you back sometime.
Yeah, I'm happy to come back. Okay. I can talk about this stuff all day.
Awesome.
Well, and the other thing is, we, like, Natalie and I, feel like we're very strong, and like I'm going to be in New York at the end of next month, and I'm debating on like my free evening that I have going to the Scientology Center just to see it. But now you have me terrified to go there, because it's like
he's going to call me and be like, Natalie, I'm a Scientologist.
Like, Natalie, you haven't heard the real story. You haven't heard what Elron really meant when he said this. But
I will be your suppressive person.
Yeah, no, almost everything we talked about today, except for that ruin finding stuff, is stuff you're never going to hear on the first day.
Sure.
They're not going to tell you about this stuff. They're going to try to find your ruin, and they're going to try to appeal to you on an emotional basis. That the logical fallacies that get people into Scientology are appeal to emotion and appeal to authority. Mm-hmm. And if you can resist, falling into that trap, you're going to be fine.
Well, I don't have emotion, so I mean, there we go.
Done. You're good. We'll find a different cult for you. Okay, so Chris, for people who want to like find you on the internet after listening to this, where can they find you?
Google Chris Shelton Scientology. My channel is Chris Shelton on YouTube. My blog is called mncriticalthinking.com because I used to be in Minnesota, so it was the Minnesota Critical Thinker, but then I moved away and I moved to Denver, so now I'm the Critical Thinker at large. But it's mncriticalthinking.com. All of my articles, all my videos, all of that is on that blog. And I have a book called Scientology A to Z New, an insider's guide to what Scientology is really all about. It is not a memoir. My book is a critical analysis of Scientology. And I only talk about myself in the first chapter to sort of establish some credentials, but I review what Dianetics is, what Scientology is, who L. Ron Hubbard is, how they got tax exemption, and also there's 3 chapters in that book on recovering from Scientology. So I'm very proud of that book, and I think it's on Amazon, and it's an audiobook, ebook, whatever, but it's all out there, so people can check that out.
All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us. This has been fantastic.
Yeah, absolutely. You're very welcome. It was fun.
Thank you.